What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. It's Mike Zakarian. You're here with Elite Fantasy Hoops, and today we are going to be taking a look at some of the players that popped off at the end of last year's NBA season and decide, are they going to do this again? Are we buying that hype or selling that hype? And of course, if this is your first time checking out the channel, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the little notification bell, and then check out some of the bangers we've dropped in the last couple of weeks. But let's get started. Our first player that we're going to take a look at is the Memphis Grizzlies guy, GG Jackson. Now, if you're in the daily fantasy streets or even the so rare streets, you probably were all over the Memphis Grizzlies at the back half of the year as they were embattled with a bunch of different injuries. And because of that, guys like GG Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. became massively impactful players in the fantasy streets. But the Grizzlies are now healthy. Marcus Smart returns. Ja Morant's put his guns away and he's ready to play some basketball. Brandon Clark's recovered. They drafted Zach Edey. So can GG Jackson continue to produce as well as he did down the stretch for the Grizzlies? In the last 25 games GG Jackson played, he was dropping 17 points, 5 boards, and over 2 assists per game. So now the question you have to decide is, with the Memphis Grizzlies being completely helpful, is GG Jackson going to be able to continue to produce in the manner that he did at the end of last season? Now, I'm pro GG Jackson. He's one of my favorite players to watch, and that dude has some real confidence while he's out there balling. But I can't really decide if he's going to move into this six-man role where he's still going to produce a ton off the bench, or if his minutes are going to be limited to 15 to 18 minutes per game. And then if he's popping off, Taylor Jenkins will let him play a little bit more. But I think for me, from the fantasy perspective, I'm going to be selling the hype on GG Jackson while rooting for him to play. I'm going to be selling the hype on GG, but I'm still going to be rooting for him because he's one of my favorite players to watch. But I just don't know if he's going to be able to get the same type of minutes. And even if he does get those minutes, is he going to get the usage? Because again, you know, Ja Morant's going to be taking up a ton of that usage. And they might even have either Desmond Bane or Marcus Smart do a lot of the ball handling and facilitation in the second unit. So it might be a wait and see approach for me with GG Jackson, but I'm definitely not going to be overweight on him in the best ball streets, and I'm not rushing to draft him or buy his so rare cards just yet. We're now heading to the Pacific Northwest, the Portland Trail Blazers. We're going to have a couple of players from this roster that we're going to talk about today. But first is the newly minted Portland Trail Blazer, Deni Avdija. And apologies if I screwed up the pronunciation of that last name, Deni. I'm trying. But Deni turned into a fantasy monster the second half of the year when the Wizards decided to go full tank mode and were sitting guys left and right. In his last 20 games, Deni averaged almost 18 points, 9 boards, and over 4 dimes a game. Now we're looking at a double-double from Deni. Now there's two different ways we can look at this, because Portland legit traded some draft capital to bring Deni over, and you would have to think he's going to have a similar role. Yes, Scoot Henderson's out there. Obviously, Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton. It seems like there's a lot of mouths to feed, but I have to imagine that Deni's going to have an impactful role. On the other hand, I can't imagine a world where the Portland Trail Blazers in 2024, 2025 are trying to win games. So you have to decide, are we going to get second half of the year Washington Wizards Deni Avdija when he was out there putting up big time double doubles on a nightly basis? Or is he going to turn into like a fourth option for the Trail Blazers and then be one of the first guys they shut down when they inevitably start to tank? Now, I'll be honest, I'm really on the fence of what to do with Deni, but here's what I'm leaning on. I know that the Portland Trail Blazers front office are trying as hard as they can to make a move and make a move fast. And that means one or more of Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simons, then most likely one of their bigs with DeAndre Ayton or Robert Williams is going to get moved. And I have to believe that if the Trailblazers were willing to get rid of first-round picks to bring Deni over, that they believe he is a part of the short-term and long-term rebuild. So it doesn't feel good right now, but I'm trying to get overweight on Deni Avdija. Sign me up for the Deni. I believe that we're going to get what we saw that second half of the season with the Washington Wizards last year in Portland. Maybe he becomes like the veteran presence they lean on as they're building out Scoot and Shaedon Sharpe. Deni becomes that wing player that they need to lead the way forward. And yes, that might be some sweet, sweet hopium I'm pumping into the universe. All right, we're going to stay in Portland with our guy, Dalano Banton. Banton for the last couple of seasons has become a so rare or a DraftKings FanDuel god at the end of the season. When teams turn to tank, Dalano Banton turns into mid-90s Michael Jordan. In the last 20 games of the season, Banton was averaging 19 points, 5 dimes, and 4 boards. Was just an absolute fantasy monster. But again, it's figuring out what Portland is doing. If somehow the Trailblazers decide they're keeping all of their big men, that's DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams, and also the rookie Klingon that we already talked about. If they're keeping Jeremy Grant, they've now got Deni, Scoot, Shaedon Sharpe, Simons. They've got all these bros out here. Where is Banton finding those minutes? But again, if the Blazers do decide to move off of some of those dudes, and then we head into the All-Star break, and the Trailblazers are like, you know what would look good in the Pacific Northwest? A big old white guy. Shout out Cooper Flag. Put a beanie on him in Portland. Give him a cup of coffee. He's going to fit right in. So if you think that's the direction the Trailblazers are going to go, give me the Banton. Now, this next fantasy darling took his talents from the Oklahoma City Thunder and went on up to Charlotte. Not voluntarily, he was traded, but Tre Mann was filling up the stat sheet the second half of the season, averaging 12 points, 5 assists, and 4 boards, along with a handful of steals and blocks per game. Tre Mann was somebody that I always believed in when he was at the Oklahoma City Thunder. However, OKC piled up a massive assets that are uncomparable to any other team in the league right now, so Mann couldn't really crack the rotation too regularly, and then he got to Charlotte and was given an opportunity to blossom. I'm not really sure what his role is going to look like moving forward, because a lot of that work was done while he was playing a little bit of point guard. Him and Micic running the show for a while there. But LaMelo Ball is back, and Charlotte seems like they're trying to win not like a ton of games, but more games than normal. So I think moving forward, I'm going to put Tre Mann in the GG Jackson category, where I'm going to be rooting for the guy, but I'm not trying to get overweight on Mann until I see how they're using him while the Hornets are trying to win. All we've seen from Tre Mann is the basketball he's played on the losing team, the Charlotte Hornets. That being said, I don't think it's the worst dart throw out there, because even if he becomes the first guy they bring in off the bench and he's running the backup point, he's still getting frisky out there. Maybe he plays well enough that he doesn't start, but he closes games for Charlotte. I do think Tre Mann can still be a useful asset. I just don't know if I'm getting ahead of it in the preseason. Before we get to our last player that we're going to talk about, just a reminder, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. We're going to be trying to put out weekly content as we ramp up towards the NBA season. We'll have some underdog content as we're drafting some best ball. We'll introduce you to some so rare, so you're ready to go for season 3. And then we're just getting you prepared for the new NBA season. So make sure you subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. Who did I miss out of the 5 guys that we're either buying or selling some hype on? All right, number 5, we're heading to Salt Lake City, and it's your boy Keyonte George. Those last 20 games that Keyonte put up there for the Utah Jazz, he was averaging 15 points, almost 5 assists, and 4 boards per game. Keyonte is clearly their point guard of the future, but Utah is in a weird situation similar to what Portland's doing, but even weirder. They just extended Lauri Markkanen, and they did it after August 7th deadline. If you're a Golden State Warrior fan, you're probably crying about that, but this means that Lauri Markkanen is going to be on the Utah Jazz for the entirety of the year. They still have Jordan Clarkson, Colin Sexton, John Collins. They have a bunch of guys that could make them this middling team. So Utah kind of has to pick a direction. And if Clarkson and Sexton are going to continue to play 30 plus minutes a game for the Jazz this entire NBA season, Keyonte George is not going to be worth it. But if they do decide to move off, Keyonte George is going to be dominant. But if Utah comes to its senses and, just like Portland, wants to make sure they get a white guy who could be a face of the team for the future and Cooper Flag, you got to imagine Clarkson and Sexton aren't going to be there. So I am going to be buying the Keyonte George hype. I was big on him as a rookie year, so yes, I'm super biased in this take, but I do think Keyonte is going to pop off again in year 2. He's going to have the ball in his hands a ton. Utah's going to be trying to lose, so it might not feel like a sexy pick, but from a fantasy perspective, I think it's going to be a great pick. All right, there you have it. Those are the 5 players we were taking a look at in buying or selling the hype for guys that were popping off at the end of last season. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe. We'll see you next time.